pretty well.
Yeah.
Doing well these days, with all the pleasant
Mm.
and unpleasant
Yeah.
circumstances at the same time. Trying to balance it all out, I'm sure, as everybody else out there is.
Mhm.
How are you?
I'm doing well. It's
Good.
the same as you. Still navigating through all the
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 COVID.
little pandemic we're in right now.
Yeah, yeah.
So tell me your thoughts about what we're experiencing right now.
Well, probably the same as everybody else's.
Okay.
Well, maybe not. You know, we're talking about just taking just a few minutes to talk about this. Not the whole episode, but I think that's something we still can talk about for a few minutes.
Sure.
And I think the thing that comes to mind with me on this, and it being, now I think we're in the latter half of May.
Gosh, yeah.
Speaking to everybody right now, that's where we are. That's the date. So we're in the latter part of May here.
2 months in this
Yeah.
sheltering in place.
And I'm thinking about the word that comes to mind is fear.
Okay.
And so we want to address that just for a few minutes, and just different thoughts on that and reactions. And everybody, of course, is free to feel how you feel about it, but still want to talk about it and try to provoke some thought here. And thinking about it, I was born in 72. I was born in 54, graduated high school in 72.
Yeah.
And so I get ahead of myself here sometimes. So what I want to say is, I think about my mom and dad, who have both passed on,
Okay.
gone on to bigger and better things, much more happier things.
Different plane.
Different plane. And both of them were born in the teens. That would be 1913 and 1918,
Okay.
Dad and Mom. So I think we think about that, and you take a quick timeline through that. Let me speed up my talking a little bit. And just to think about that, I'm sure your grandparents would have been, in some involved in some of that. And thinking about that, so my mom and dad born in World War I,
Okay.
during the time of World War I. And right after, of course, World War I was the Spanish flu that killed millions of people in 1919, 1920, somewhere in there. And then, so they're alive, they're kids in the 20s, flapper girls. And
Roaring
Prohibition,
20s.
Roaring 20s. And then suddenly what happens? The Great Depression. So they function in that. My dad and mom both up in there in Chicago and in Kentucky, respectively. Mom and dad didn't know each other then. And so their Great Depression, they survived that. Of course, at the end of the 30s, then we have the beginning of World War II. So they lived through World War II. My dad, of course, being in the Navy in the South Pacific in 44 and 45.
Okay.
USS Bassett in dangerous waters. And by the grace of the giver, he survived that. Came back, married Mom right after the war. And so I'm born, of course, in 54. 54 is near the end of the Korean War. So I'm born at that time. 60s are good years, I think. A lot of cultural change. So we get to the 60s.
Free love and Woodstock.
And not so free love sometimes, and Woodstock, and some great music. Rock and roll. I'm all about rock and roll. So I think I'm going to Vietnam.
Okay.
When I'm in high school, because draft is there, all that. So, but I didn't. But I was prepared to go. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to Vietnam. So made it through there. But sure enough, it's only a few years later I'm living around the world anyway. In the middle 70s, I'm taking off and traveling around the world anyway, living in Turkey and other places. So go through that, and go into the wild 80s. Disco, 70s and 80s, some disco.
You
and
survived
all that.
disco, man.
Survived disco, man. And so, then you got the Gulf Wars. You got 9/11.
The first Gulf War. Yeah.
Yeah, and you got 9/11, which is a huge deal. And Gulf War again, and anyway, just coming up to where we are now, we have a pandemic, and thinking about that, and I think it's a matter of perspective.
Okay.
I don't know I think what you might have to want to say about that, is I think we've talked about that a little bit,
We have.
and the perspective of everything's said and done. We're not through this pandemic yet, but when you put it into perspective of the last century, that's a healthy thing. And I think that helps people not to give in to so much fear.
Okay.
Once we consider what's really going on with the pandemic. Very serious. At the same time, in this last century, and it's list of the last century, and we could add other things too. For me, so far, and this is just my personal
Sure.
opinion, it doesn't make the top 10. I'm older and I've been through a lot more, and I'm very aware of the history, since I did teach history, and I'm very aware of the history of things about what's going on, but it doesn't do that for me at this point. And I can say that objectively, as far as because I want to say that.
Yeah, we discussed it. This whole pandemic. It depends on in what context. So it could be like you said, it's your personal experiences. Some people out there might be experiencing it. They might be working the front lines, or a family member or a friend might be, personally affected by it. So it's
wonderful.
But just like
people working.
just like you said, it's as far as the past century and what's been happening in
that's
the world.
The context I was saying.
It's it doesn't, for me as well. It doesn't even crack the top 10 of what's.
And I'm not. We're not trying to put down what's going on in any way. It's the whole thing about fear, and I think just to sort of close out this little part of it and move on to one other thing, one other storyline. After this is what the thought that came is the idea of fear, and I could give all kinds of quotes there, and of course one of my favorite comes from Dune, and remember Dune.
Sure.
Anyway, they're making a whole new movie at the end of this year is coming out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, big deal.
So share this quote if you.
He was in the ship, and it's the, it's I can't think of his name now, but he's the leader, and he's got his life threatened, and something's going on with the worms, and he just says, "Fear is the mind killer. I must not fear, because it's fear that leads to inaction." And so I think that let's not be frozen with this, and I think you're not, and I think people are getting out of that now for the most part, so let's not let fear condition us, and let's be careful of those that would use fear to condition our thinking and expect us to give in to fear. So don't do it. Just make a self-determination, because that's the ability that you have been given, that we were created with, we as human beings, to make those kind of choices. We are free.
Especially here in America, we have the individual freedoms and liberties that not the rest of the world has. So.
Yeah, you're right. So let's just kind of throw that out there, because we're coming back during the pandemic time, and
we're feeling it, and everyone
certainly,
everyone,
and to be careful, and to be wise,
it.
and to be more hopeful than fearful. That's, if you want to have an obligation, a place to shoot for. If you're feeling fearful, shake your head, shake it out, and give yourself the grace to say, I want to be centered on hope, and not give in to fear. For fear is the mind killer. It will freeze your mind.
I like that.
And your heart and your spirit.
I like that.
So don't give in to it. I will not fear. We will not fear.
Take care of your immune system.
There you go. He knows about that. He knows about that. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for being here today and joining us. What do you have in mind today, John? What do you want to talk about?
Again, we're going to continue our storyline about life on the road. That's the theme that we're having for a good while in this particular series is on the road, and the themes from my experiences on the road and what it may teach,
Yeah,
what it's taught me quickly, and what it may stimulate you to think about.
So where are you taking us today?
This will be a little different because it will include someone else besides myself.
Okay.
So actually, I have been married in my past one time. So I was married in '84 and took a trip with my wife
Okay.
in '86. I said, I'll take you on the road with me. And she's like, okay. So we went to Turkey, 1986. I said, I'm going to show you some things in Turkey. She said, okay. So we went to Turkey. So we Istanbul and wonderful, and traveled around a little bit up north and came down to Izmir, which I'm very familiar with in my past travels. And so one day we take a walk, and I took her through the bazaar.
Okay.
You've heard of the bazaar, not bazaar like you might think. It wasn't bazaar like it was
So
something.
what is the bazaar
like some,
for some that don't know?
like some film. But the bazaar was all these shops and all these wonderful Turkish foods and shops, and from anything you wanted to buy. So just this covered bazaar with all this stuff, and just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And everybody loves that type of thing, especially when you're on the road. So she was all fascinated with that, and had a good time that day walking through the bazaar. 3 or 4 hours just hanging out. Bought some knickknacks here and things, some souvenirs for her to take back. And so we got done, went to our hotel room.
Okay.
So, and had a nice little dinner somewhere, probably some doner kebab or something like that, maybe some fish, I don't remember. So went to our hotel room.
Some hummus.
Yeah, some hummus. Went to the room and got a good night's sleep, and I don't even know what we planned the next day because 6 something in the morning, just becoming light, suddenly at our hotel door was
Room
like
service?
that. No, it wasn't room service. So I'm like, whoa! We're like, whoa! I thought, whoa, what's up with that? Kind of an unusual type knock. It wasn't a polite knock, a demanding knock. And so got up, said Kimson, and who is it? And opened the door. Man standing there. He said, "You, John Seipel." Seiple. That's what he said. I went, yes. I'm thinking, how does this guy even know where I am in this hotel room here in Izmir? He goes, you need to come to the consulate, American consulate in Izmir. I went, really? He goes, yes, we will wait. You come. I went, okay. So I shut the door and said to Kay, to my then wife, and I said, gotta go. And she's like, okay. And we both thought, somebody's died.
Okay.
There's been a terrible something back in the States, and they've located us somehow, some disaster. And I'm thinking, how did they find us? And so, anyway, they escorted us 10 minutes later, we're out the door. They escorted us to the American consulate, went in, immediately got taken back into the back room. An American man came out and said, come on back, please. Showed them our passports. Come on back, please. Consulate wasn't even open then. This was before it opened. And took us back and to a small room. So we sat at a table, a low table, a desk. The man got behind the desk, and he sat down looking at us, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? And he said, just a minute, please. So he sat there, fiddled with some stuff around the desk, kind of this and this, and had his hands under the desk and all this. So I'm just very like, what in the heck is going on? He says, okay, Mr. Seipel, Mrs. Seipel, okay, I'm such and such, don't even remember his name. And he says, I have to ask you something.
So did this man work for the embassy, the consulate?
Yeah, the consulate, the American. So he was there, stationed there, and obviously what's going to happen is he's the intelligence officer for that particular situation. He's connected to that way. as I came to find out from what he asked.
Sure.
So, I said, he goes, okay. Before we begin, he goes, and I was sitting across from him
Okay.
like this, and he said, before we begin, I have to ask you something, sir. And I went, okay. He goes, kind of looked around the desk, and I was like, okay. He seemed distracted for a minute. Just want to say that.
Okay.
And he said, okay, Mr. Seipel, are you in any way connected to or work for or in the employment of the Israeli Mossad? I went, excuse me? I said, are you asking me if I'm connected to or work for the Mossad of Israel?
So what is the Mossad of Israel?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Now?
It's the Israeli Premier Intelligence Service.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay. The Mossad. So, and I said, And so I started to ask him again. He goes, excuse me. Really? He goes, he's my age. Talk to me like that for. He said, excuse me. He goes, let me ask again. Are you in any way connected to, work for, employment of the Israeli Mossad, Mr. Seipel? And I went, no, I'm not. I said, I'm not employed by Israeli Mossad. He fiddled with something. He goes, let me ask you, make sure. Let me just ask you again. This is when it began to dawn on me that something's going on, which turned out later that I figured it out. At the time, I was like, not just sort of taken in, but he was making sure it was being recorded.
Okay, I got you.
I'm sure that was his instructions. So he asked me a third time, same thing, and I says, no, sir, I am not employed, or do I work for the Israeli Mossad? He goes, okay. I said, can you tell me what's going on, please? And he said, yes, I can tell you this much. Yesterday, you all spent the day in the bazaar here in Izmir, didn't you? I went, oh, yes, we did. He goes, well, sir, you were being followed by agents from Damascus. They were Syrian agents who were following you because they apparently have mistaken you for an agent of Israel that works for the Mossad that is in the area, or reported to be in the area, or something like that. I went, really? He goes, oh, yes, sir. Those same agents were also observed while they were following you back to your hotel. And they have been watched. He said, so you apparently, whatever is really going on, he goes, you apparently fit the description of this agent, and we're very concerned for your safety. I went, oh. My then wife, of course, was...
But she was freaking out, huh?
She's just, I'm sure, just, thinking, I married this guy last year.
This is supposed to be your honeymoon?
Well, no, we're just out of our first year of marriage.
I got you.
Into our second year. So I can just say that her eyes were rather large, I'm sure, as I know they were, glancing over at her. And so I said, well, okay, there you have it. I says, what are you saying then? He goes, well, what are your plans? And I said, well, we had plans to spend some time in Izmir. I know the area well, and go to Pamukkale and Denizli and look around the area.
Because you've lived there before.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've traveled extensively in that area in my past, all around through that part of the world. And he said, well, we would strongly advise that you not do that. We feel like that we have some responsibility here. And I went, okay. My wife being with me, of course, that's the whole idea that I wasn't by myself. And I was like, okay, what is the best thing to do? He goes, well, we'd like for you to leave Izmir, and if are you going to be in Turkey very much longer? I said, well, we were planning to go south and eventually go over to some of the Greek islands. He says, well, could you, do that as quick as possible? So we agreed to that, and we left, and they provided an escort us back to a hotel while we packed, waited for us, provided an escort out to the bus station. We're on Turkish buses, which is great transportation, just seeing the countryside, waiting for us to get a ticket to the very southern part of the country where we can get a boat to one of the Greek islands.
Okay.
A ferry to one of the Greek islands. So we did that. So they escorted us there, watched us, got on the bus, sent us out to Bodrum, got to Bodrum and had dinner there that night, and I think we left the next day, if I'm not mistaken, for one of the Greek islands. And of course, it was frightening for my ex-wife a lot, for her to experience that. Just the whole idea of something like almost out of the movies type thing, just something like, what? It's funny how, like a virus, you can have, you too out there could be followed by Syrian agents. You just don't know. You could have the idea being that there's something out there that you don't see that was sort of stalking you. And I'm really working hard for this analogy, aren't I? Just really working hard. And you have to forgive me for that, but it kind of comes to me like that. And stalking, you have no idea that there's a danger out there. And so we washed our hands of the whole thing, to carry on the analogy, and took off for Greece. So, what an eye-opening experience for my then wife, and so it wasn't long after that, just a few years until she divorced me. So I'm sure that's probably the reason right there.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, how did you, how did you console her, for lack of a better word, to where like everything's going to be okay?
Well, just say, mainly just get out of the situation.
Okay.
Since don't want that. See, they knew me in that area. They already knew who I was at the consulate. They were very aware of me because of my past travels in that area. And so when we discussed it, he goes, "Yeah, we have a file on me already." So it worked out well. It's a good question. It's just that it was the difficult part of it was I was worried for her once I found that out. I was just like, okay, which is a natural kicks in for anybody, whether it's a husband for a wife, a mother for a child, people worrying for each other. So
there's always spies lurking around in their travels and
the idea it shows you that even on the road, the unexpected can still bring you to a closer sense of what it's all about. So, to kind of bring our beginning story about talking about the pandemic and talking about the story that I spoke to you right now about that particular experience.
And not living in fear.
Not living in fear, is this kind of bring those together in that sense is that there's a kind of idea being that we can condition ourselves to think in terms of freedom and hope and expecting good to come from a situation. Like in this situation is, with the pandemic, there are many people, this is their first brush with their own mortality. Especially for a lot of young people, especially for that. This is their first brush and they're like, oh my God, oh! And they're scared witless. And they're sitting at home, just afraid to move because something's going to get them. Something's going to get you. So the idea that we want to bring up here is, even in this closed environment that we live here in the United States presently, there is that fear that can spring up, and you just have to deal with it in the most remarkable way, which is to give yourselves over, not to fear. And you make that determination. That's the freedom we have.
Yeah.
To make that determination, like, I'm not going to do it. And as much as the culture and the media and much of what goes on, your background, who your friends are, social, especially your social stuff, what you're doing on the social stuff, they're going to either condition you to be afraid or they're not. If you feel like there's a lot of fear coming of, oh, don't go out. Oh, people that go out are bad. Or They're trying to work, but you know what? They should really stay in because this. If you're listening to this and you still are living in some kind of fear, just snap out of it. And I mean that respectfully.
And like with that said, I know we have to coexist with other people in the world, and we do have to be respectful. And,
yes,
and
we
you
do.
know, to a certain degree.
Yes, we do.
But at the same time, it's for my perspective,
right,
and
you're
open up people's eyes to and their minds to really, to not live in such fear, because even if we're holed up in our homes and what have you, we can still get diseases and
oh yeah, there's the mortality aspect, and so I think to kind of maybe just to kind of put a capper on this particular discussion is, how do I want to say this? It's something you want to say, but it doesn't. It's hard to bring it out because, part of the way that we're presenting this is we talk about things and we discuss it a little bit beforehand, but we're just wanting to talk about it and bring out what the most important things that come to us in that. And hopefully it's thought-provoking for you, or comforting, or something, or challenging, where you just say, I don't like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, because you don't like it means you're thinking about it. So we're still successful. And so the idea being that, and just to get people to respect yourself so much, and who and how you're made, and how much you're worth, just to say, I want to live my life in hope, and give that hope to others, and how I condition myself when I have this brush with death, as many people think they might have or could have, is that you say, you know what? This is not controlling me. The media is not going to control me. The social media is not going to control me. Even friends that are negative and that are fearful are not going to control me. I'm going to be a human being and live up to the potential of being a human being and get out of here. Now, people of faith, of course, have something. And if you're a person that's not of faith and more secular in your thoughts, okay, that's the choice. At the same time, still don't be susceptible to that spirit of fear that's generated by the state, which probably a lot of people that are not of faith would look to. So don't let that become a fear-driven aspect of this situation. Be free.
All right.
Hallelujah. Be free.
Amen. Well, let's sit in there.
You want to
I think
there?
that's,
I think it's probably a good place to end,
it
because
is.
I need to stop myself. I need to stop myself right now because I got stuff to say.
Well, join us next time. Thank you.
Peace.